Okay, well, welcome to another podcast session on the Consalia Sales Transformation podcast series. I'm absolutely thrilled that we've been able to find some time with Lindsey Rowe from SAP for this particular session. And the topic of this particular session is going to be around the sales apprenticeship initiative that SAP have kind of set up, and to explore some of the challenges with that, motivations for doing so. But before we get started, if I could ask you, Lindsey, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a bit of a potted history about you and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Phil. And delighted to be with you as well. So, yeah, do you know what? Every time I look at, you have to give a personal bio or something like that. And then each time you go, oh gosh, I've got to add a couple of years to that each time. But being kind of fortunate enough to, be in the industry, certainly in the tech and software industry for about 20 years now. And to your point, that career history has been quite varied. So I've been fortunate enough to work in both public and private sector. So originally coming straight out of school into the industry, working for HSBC, and then my career took multiple different paths, but really got into tech back in 2004. And my career has kind of expanded across those areas, whether it's sales, operations, customer facing roles, as well as kind of internal operational roles. Joined SAP 9 years ago, and really very much in the sort of sales operations, revenue operations space, and then more recently getting much more involved in kind of customer facing, as well as per my title, I look at our strategic programs and sustainability go to market. And I guess interestingly, that's where apprenticeships come in, very much in that strategic programs and thinking about people's sustainability.
Yes, I would say that that you have not a traditional kind of role for people who kind of lead apprenticeship programs, and I think that in itself is interesting. And I wonder whether you could explain a little bit about why you've got involved in looking at sales apprenticeships at SAP.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's certainly not traditional. I think SAP is pretty unique in this space that it's more business led program of activity. That's not to say that, of course, we don't partner with HR and talent attraction as part of it. But yeah, absolutely, it's a business led program. Again, I think it's partly to do with my career history. So I did take, I was in a role a good few years ago now, working for an organisation called SEMTA. SEMTA were responsible for driving all the standards for apprenticeships in the science, engineering, and manufacturing industry. And so that's where I sort of learned about the whole concept, how the frameworks work, but in one particular industry and field, really. And then I joined a very small organisation in comparison revenue wise to somewhere like SAP, where we did a trailblazing apprenticeship framework for unified communications. Now, again, that was long before the pandemic and where anyone was using things like Teams or Zoom or whatever, but we clearly saw there was a need to develop skills in that space. So that's really where I learned about the value of apprenticeships, but also the mechanics. And that's, I think, a really important part of any organisation's journey is understanding what are the mechanics to make it happen, what are the highs and lows of doing that, and also who do you need to partner with to launch such a program, and also really digging into the fact that apprenticeships aren't just about school leavers coming into a work environment. So that was part of it, understanding the logistics, the mechanics, and how it might work. And they've come on loads even in that time, and the industry focus and breadth. But I guess then the passion to drive it forward was thinking about, well, individuals that perhaps didn't go to university or choose that path, how are they going to get into these environments and have those opportunities? If we only solely looked at individuals getting degrees as their route in, it would really limit your talent pool. So that's where the passion part, and you need that to drive through these programs, really.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll explore a little bit more around that topic. But again, also to give some context to this conversation, SAP has not long pursued this sales apprenticeship kind of initiative. How many years ago did you start?
Well, there's the official answer, Phil, and the reality. I guess there's a couple of things to consider. So when we think about the apprenticeship program that we lead with in partnership with yourselves, there's two aspects to it. One is kind of level 7 masters upskilling activity, and actually we've been partnering with you a number of years, but long before we looked at the levy aspect of that. But the level 6, the degree apprenticeship, the business to business sales, we actually launched 11 months ago. So 1st of September was when they actually joined us, but a good 3-4 years in the making. I actually found a picture on my phone the other day where I'd scribbled apprenticeship as a concept on a whiteboard back in 2018, actually. But it took
Wow.
some time to really, let's say, I'll talk about the mechanics and the logistics, but that's so important to it. So,
Yeah.
and educating businesses. It's quite a UK centric approach, or even an England skills centric approach. So, getting people on board, it requires quite a lot of an internal enablement as well.
Yeah, I remember the kind of early stages of the journey that you were going through in order to get the um, sales apprenticeship program sort of started here in the UK. And I think that there was so much heavy lifting that you had to do in order to sort of get it off the ground. And I can't believe it's just 11 months. It seems to me a lot longer than that, actually. But I did just also to give some context for the listeners here. What's been extraordinary about the initiatives that have been led by Lindsey and the team at SAP is that within that short space of time, they've entered the apprenticeship kind of awards, employer awards, and initially got into the top 100, and then I think it was in the top 30. Were you 13th
The
in
13th, yes.
yeah, which is your unlucky 13, except I loved your post that you you put on LinkedIn about that. But I mean, so not only is it quite a young program, but clearly in the context of SAP, but clearly there are things that you have done to set the program up in such a way that it's successful. And arguably that sort of heavy lifting that you did in the early stages has been one of the factors that has influenced the success of the apprenticeship program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite easy, at the times where you're kind of going through the highs and lows, and in those low moments, thinking, is this truly worth it to get this off the ground? And when you're wanting to, just get started, but actually in that time, it was thinking about the foundations that are needed. It's one thing getting approvals to take that approach, but then actually what's it going to be like when they arrive, when they first walk through the doors? What are we going to do? And I think one of the most interesting parts for us was the fact that we've had sales interns for a number of years, probably 15 years actually, and with great success, but naturally they leave after a year. So we saw this as an opportunity to, we're a sales-led organization, therefore, having that talent pool with us for longer, kind of home growing that talent was going to be the route. But yeah, we've learned as we've gone along as well. So once you get started and then walk through the doors, we've created curricula on the run, on the go, that to enhance what they get as part of their core course. Some stuff around kind of professional skills, but we really just needed a couple of managers that were, I guess, open-minded enough to take the gamble with us, believe some of the things that we're saying as to why we should do it. but then taking their feedback, what we were observing, and as part of it, because it is quite different to when interns join the business, what their expectations are, and just, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I probably one day maybe we write a book about it, just the differences of them coming in, and the external factors that influence them when they join the business, and the drive is very different.
So, for the level 6 program, which is the BSc program, um, what percentage of the intake you've had on the apprenticeship program has come from interns versus people you might have recruited onto the apprenticeship program directly?
All of them are
All
pure
of them.
apprentices. Yeah, all either school leavers, so directly straight out of school, or perhaps they've taken maybe 1 or 2 years of other roles and maybe some travelling, some gap time. But all of them, so none of them have come from any university background or internship, just purely through, a school leaver path.
Oh, okay. So they haven't come necessarily from interns who've been with you and then come onto the apprenticeship program. These have been outside of that intern
Yeah. So
kind of
our
relation.
intern program, typically they'll have done 2 years at university. They spend a
Ah,
year with us on a more like a business placement, and then after that year they go and do their final year at university. So we always knew that the talent we would attract would either be school leavers, career changers, career returnees. So we were very open minded to who we would, I guess, attract. It didn't have to be a school leaver journey, but it certainly wouldn't be anybody coming through naturally, because
mm.
we'd be funding the degree path.
So traditionally, SAP have gone down a graduate intake route. Is that right? Into the sales, I say historically, not traditionally, perhaps. And what the sales apprenticeship program is doing is now sort of looking at a different source potentially of future talent coming into the organization, perhaps a younger person coming in.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because there's different entry routes into sales in any organisation. If we look to our sales academy, which is a global program, that's actually individuals with perhaps 2 to 3 years of sales experience. Then going into that academy, they spend some time out in our offices out in California on a very dedicated program of learning over a year's period. So, very successful program, has bred a good talent pool of salespeople for SAP across the globe, and especially in the UK. But of course, that requires 2 to 3 years experience. Naturally, individuals coming into internships, once they go back to university and they go different routes, they will they may have been studying anything. It could be a humanities, it could be business management. We actually pride ourselves on the fact we don't dictate a particular degree discipline, but really it was what's what would be the other pool that would actually mean that whilst you're developing them for 3 to 4 years in an apprenticeship program, would actually make them naturally clear to go straight into a sales role, whether that's business development, whether that's more operational, whether that's pre-sales, or
Hmm.
perhaps onto the academy. So it gave us many more paths for these individuals to go down. Because often people think, oh, I want to get into sales, and actually their skill sets are more suited to perhaps pre-sales, as I say, or kind of sales operations. Likewise, other people don't realise that they're really talented for sales, and perhaps accidentally fall into it later in their career, but didn't have any of the academic and theoretical aspects of sales being a profession. That was kind of part of the reason we wanted to have.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a big risk that you potentially took to kind of open up the opportunity, in the way that you have. How did you market the kind of role, the apprenticeship program? How did you get word out there to potential school leavers?
So, because it was our first year running, and we were so new to it in terms of what the various paths were. So one aspect is that we knew we needed to choose a provider that was experienced in this space, and it's one of the more unique frameworks, let's say. So that was part of it, making sure that any provider we worked with would be able to help us identify the types of talent. But in terms of pure attraction, we use the government websites, UCAS, because they're often the routes that students would be looking at. But we also partnered with RateMyApprenticeship. We had a long-standing partnership with them under Rate My Placement. They've been our partner of choice for a number of years and sort of leading platform for internships. So it made a lot of sense for them to help us and get us out there as known as an apprenticeship provider as well.
And in terms of the applicants that you had, when you saw the applicants putting their names forward, what was your reaction to the quantity and the quality of the applicants that you attracted?
Yeah, so we didn't know what to expect or what to predict. And of course, if you're a school leaver, there is only so much you can write on your CV. So we knew that our assessment centre would be actually the thing that would really make the difference to the assessment. As it was our first time, I actually went through every single CV personally on this one, and I couldn't help myself because I was just intrigued. I wanted to understand the differences of what we might see. I mean, with any attraction program that you run, we saw individuals applying for this program who had 2 or 3 degrees. Some of these individuals had been working or in the industry for many years. So it's a bit of an eye opener to realise just the struggles that some individuals are having in the employment space, despite perhaps having a formal education. But once we kind of got down to the individuals that would be eligible and the criteria, I think it was really difficult for the team to actually even get to shortlist because there was a lot of passion. Because really, it's the cover letter in this scenario that tells you more than anything as to the driver. Why is it the individual wants to go down this route and not university? But I'd say it's probably the assessment centre that really brought it to life. It felt entirely different to an internship assessment centre, despite face value appearing to be the same concept.
Right. So you ran assessment centres for those that you felt, were potentially sort of suitable for the role. Did you find that the background of the applicants sort of different in any way? Because I know that diversity is something that's really important to SAP, and I just wondered whether you were getting applicants that you wouldn't normally get, yet still with the potential to have a successful career in sales.
100%. That was the biggest, because at the same time that we were launching sales, we were also launching digital. So we actually had 2 assessment centres and two apprenticeship standards. So we're looking for digital technical professionals and then also sales. So naturally, with the apprenticeship, you are getting people that are much more localised to your headquarters, and therefore the natural diversity of the region you're based really comes through.
Okay.
And so if we look at internships, we, hire from every university around the country. We have international students. So you get a natural sense of diversity, but quite different. And we're seeing a much higher attraction of females into tech now than you would have seen 10, 15 years ago. But the diversity, we're headquartered out in Feltham, we're based in Hounslow. And so naturally the London and surrounding areas has a different diversity, both a socioeconomic basis, cultural basis. And so, we were fascinated to see the much more organic diversity, no requirements for any forced activity. It was all entirely natural and representative of where we are based and the communities that we serve ultimately.
It's amazing to hear you just talk about the diversity angle. When you were looking at the applications, who were the key stakeholders that were also interested in the potential talent that was coming through onto the program?
So one of the decisions that we made specifically for the sales one was that we needed to have someone that would manage these individuals directly. That was one of our big parts of our planning and our business case. So actually for that individual, so our sales excellence apprenticeship manager was to look at not only do these individuals need to be hired, onboarded, looked after for that whole period, and have a level of consistency across all. Because naturally, if they're going to report into lots of different teams, they're going to have different exposures. So that was a key part of our business case to have that role. So they were our main stakeholder in terms of this individual is going to have to manage these people, but equally that individual was also starting in their leadership journey
Oh,
themselves.
yes.
So and had actually started their own career as a sales intern, many years ago, but actually had the experience of what that's like to be on the ground doing that type of role, then experiencing our business, and then later in their career being ready to take that on.
Mm.
Now, that was for the, that's the individual that we ended up selecting based on that history. But actually, when we went out to hire for that role, we got really interesting candidates internally as well who were very excited by this, the idea of creating and breeding a whole talent pool. So yeah, that was our other main stakeholder, was the individual that would manage them,
Mm.
and what that would look like and how that role would evolve to being the peer of the sales leaders for our particular industries and lines of business. So that was a fundamental decision in the business case, but also now we're a year in, it's very evident why we needed to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for some organizations who just have one or two going through the apprenticeship program, they couldn't have a dedicated person looking after them. But I can see in your case and other clients that we have who've got larger numbers going through that they've done something similar. They have a dedicated person. So that's great. We haven't spoken about level 7, which is the master's level apprenticeship program. How, um, you know, why did you do it, and what's been the response to the level 7 program?
So I guess we were sort of already doing it with you guys, right,
You
over
were.
a number of years, and it was interesting actually. I think Will from your team had always been trying to figure out who had the key to the levy. We were trying to figure out who had the programs to be able to deliver, and just one day, almost purely by chance, we got that connection. So most of this actually started from the level 7 discussions before we got into level 6.
Okay.
So the level 7 for us actually I'm trying to think, but quite a few years ago, one of your alumni, Stuart McCracken,
Yeah.
he was actually on the program, and he still talks so highly of it. He was a really good colleague and friend who I knew was in the program. But this was when I was in a different role, entirely not involved in this space, but just remembered his kind of excitement and his development when he was on this. And he was doing his Johari window, which has just become like a standard set of things that we do and have rolled out ourselves as a concept. So that was kind of the starting point. Then we saw more individuals going on, but naturally, there's only so many people that can go on those courses. So once we realised that we were able to utilise our levy and open this up to more individuals, we were able to then expose others and understand. As I say, a lot of people end up in sales leadership roles through, great sales experience, but perhaps haven't had that formal leadership training. But then we wanted leadership training with the lens of sales, because it's very, very specific in terms of outcomes. You still need, of course, the people leadership, but you need that extra nuanced
Hmm.
lens to it. So that's really why we got into that. But we started to look beyond existing leaders. We started to look at people that manage accounts. So leading an account is, a challenge in itself. The multiple
Hmm.
stakeholders within internally and externally, and then also our pre-sales teams. Cloud organisations like SAP, it does take a lot of. As much as I said at the start, we're a sales-led organisation, but beneath that, of course, is all of the supporting teams that make it happen. And so we've been able to broaden out our cohorts into individuals that are in pre-sales, account directors, and those that are perhaps aspiring to be a sales leader and want all the foundations before they make that step. And
Mm.
so it gives them. So it's made the cohorts again really nice, really diverse, and the fact that they get to meet with others from other organisations who are not necessarily in our space is one of the feedback points that they share, is where they often learn the most, because
Yeah.
you can get in a bubble in your own organisation.
Yeah, that's true. And we've seen that also. It's been quite interesting sort of working with the exec masters program for the international kind of dimension to what we're doing with SAP. I mean, it's great, to get people from different cultures and backgrounds and different roles across the globe. But they're all SAP, with the level 7 apprenticeship, you don't have quite those connections globally. But you do get the diversity, from other organizations. And we've been really pleased actually with the kind of learning that clearly goes on from different types of organization on that program. Is there a stigma, do you think, to this word apprenticeship that maybe stops people from considering that they should do this? How did you deal with the apprenticeship stigma?
Yeah, I think there is. I think they're still misunderstood in across the board. I think still people imagine apprenticeships from 50, 60 years ago, perhaps. And it's interesting where those stigmas may come from, because actually they're some of the most lucrative job roles that you can go into. If let's say I had children of that age making that decision, I wouldn't necessarily be saying to definitely go down a sales apprenticeship. I'd be saying look to all of the industry apprenticeships that are available, and some of the trades and all of the different areas. As we spend more time in corporate space, we learn how to do things in our house a lot less, and all the different things. So I think there is massive stigma associated with them, very misplaced, but it's changing. For us internally, for using it for upskilling of colleagues, we didn't use the term so much in the first advertising. But actually, once people are on program, people quite proudly say, I'm doing an apprenticeship. As soon as they're on it and they get it,
Great.
they are
Yeah.
not bothered by the word. Everyone quite openly says, hey, I've just done my apprenticeship. And I spoke to, it was actually a customer. So it was a customer who worked for Boots. This again going back some years ago, and he was on a apprenticeship program. He talked really so positively, and some of our partners similarly. So these were individuals with 30 plus years experience, really proudly saying, "Oh, I'm an apprentice, and I'm on this apprenticeship." And so I think once people are on it and get it, all of the stigma, it instantly goes away. It's just up front. And we're seeing it with parents. Parents are coming around to the idea of it. So if we think to like level 6, and so I think it's even harder for people now to get apprenticeships. Now that people have sort of really understood that they've changed and that they're different, and they are a truly, equivalent to going down a university route, it's actually then making them incredibly competitive. So I
Yeah.
think the stigma's going, but that makes the industry very hard for people to break into.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's wonderful to hear you say that. So you've been running the program for 11 months, and it maybe is too early to kind of judge whether or not it's been successful or not, or whether it's met your expectations. But the fact you've won this, won in top 13, is indicative of the progress that's been made or how people feel about it. So I wonder if you could maybe share how you're is sort of measuring the success of the program, and whether you've got any second thoughts about the program at all, having set it up.
Yeah, for me, it's a success purely on the basis of what I set out as the success criteria. So, and it became almost a bit of a running joke across the team and wider. I basically said, this became a little bit of a very much a personal program of activity to make it get off the ground. And it was based on the idea of, let's spend £1 of the levy and let's have one apprentice walk through the doors. If we manage that, then I'm done. I'm okay. I will feel that I've achieved what I wanted to from this. And so those two things have both happened. So from that regard, it's a success. I think if I look to how they've been in these 11 months, so if I take our sales ones as the example, they've just completed their first ever QBRs. So already they're starting to be reviewed in a very, corporate centric approach, and seeing the outputs of those, I was like, wow, sometimes I don't see that from other teams. So that really gave me that reassurance. But just actually seeing them around the business, you wouldn't really say they were apprentices. You don't
Mm,
get that feeling. They are the feedback from the teams. Some of the just more anecdotal stuff that you hear, for me, is often the true success measure. So I think it's been a success. It's not, there's a long, the next part actually is the hard stuff. It's, well, how would you then cycle your roles? You wouldn't just do this 4 years, let it stop, start again. How are we going to do that? How do we adjust our compensation frameworks to acknowledge the number of years in role? How do we keep them moving forward? How do we second them into areas to learn more? So now it's, and then the next part is, what other degree disciplines do we go down? Now that we've done digital and sales, are there other business areas
mm,
we can do this? But that's when the mechanics start coming back in again, and you start looking at, the various procurement and contractual aspects as part of it. So for me, I definitely think it's successful in terms of what we were originally looking to achieve. I think it's created a lot of awareness and education for the business about different talent pools and diverse ways of operating. But as I say, just looking at them from that minute they walked into the assessment centre to now, they feel so embedded in our business. They talk the language of our business, and actually probably more rapidly than we ever saw with our interns. And so that for me means
amazing.
it
Yeah.
does, it certainly feels successful, but not without
Yeah.
challenges.
Yes, I know it's early days, but it's difficult. But yeah, we do hear also from other clients who've got salespeople going through the level 6 how within a relatively short space of time, within a couple of years, they're in sort of quota bearing kind of roles, and they're actually performing as well as people who've been in field sales positions sometimes for many years, uh, and that in itself has a positive impact, I think, on others in the organization who have also been able to learn a bit from what these youngsters are doing, because they bring a different mindset. Obviously they're going through an incredible 3-year degree program, so that, I mean, that's serious learning and education over that period of time. So yeah, we've heard some incredible positives. It's not just about the individual; it's about the team and the organization and how they also can learn. Yeah,
Also, as our customers and other organisations follow suit, these individuals are going to be selling to peers ultimately. And so
yeah,
they need to be at that mindset matching level almost. And as if we look to SAP, we're completely transforming as an organisation. How we would have sold as an on-premise software organisation to cloud is vastly different. As we
yeah.
now become much more AI centric, again, vastly different. And so actually that's where, more digital native younger people, but not necessarily younger, because as I say, it could be career change, but just people that are passionate, let's say, about
Mm.
digital, will naturally just feel more comfortable in that space, and as I say, are going to be selling to peers, not so they'll be facing off to people in procurement who are peers who've perhaps done degree apprenticeships in that space as well.
Lindsey, if you were to look back on your experience, since day dot, which possibly is 3 or 4 years ago, is there anything you might have done differently to, have got the program off the ground and launched in any way, or do you feel you pretty well got it right, actually, even on this kind of first attempt at getting the sales apprenticeship program set up?
Yeah, I don't know if I would do anything differently, because even the things that were a little bit challenging, they were. I remember I was talking to my dad about this actually, and two examples. One from my own school setting, but then also from this. You kind of look at all the individuals that perhaps blocked your route or made things difficult or things were hard, and they're your frustrations. But actually, they're the things that made you go, right, I'm absolutely going to make this happen. I'm going to either demonstrate the why even more, or I'll go back to, the drawing board and look at the business case again. So actually, I probably wouldn't do anything differently, because actually all those blockers were the things that made it. If it had all been plain sailing, probably wouldn't have had as much. We wouldn't have put as much kind of blood, sweat, and tears into it, actually. So I don't know. On reflection, I don't think we'd do anything differently.
That's fantastic. And I mean, our observation is that I think it would have been very difficult, given the mechanical challenges, that you had to face, that anyone who wasn't in the kind of senior role that you had and with access to senior stakeholders probably couldn't have pulled it off, because I know that there was a lot of HR related issues, contracting issues. You're a German owned organization here in the UK. You've alluded to some of the challenges that other countries don't understand. This is very particular to the England market, let alone UK market. And I think it would have been enormously difficult for anyone without those kind of the stakeholder management support that you had to make this success. I'm not sure it could have resulted in what you've now achieved.
Yeah, I think definitely if I look to other organisations, and sometimes now, again, we're only 11 months in, but people do ask us advice on how we did it. And
Yeah,
like going, oh,
that's
I
great.
don't know if we're ready to give that type of advice. But if you don't have that business buy-in at that senior level, so we were fortunate enough, where we sit within, the senior leadership team, it certainly helps. I think the real thing that unlocked it massively for us, and where we then were able to work at pace, was when our new HR director was appointed into the UK. So he was actually from Germany. Alex came over to the UK, so he understood the real depths of the mechanics. What would you actually have to do? How would you make it possible? But he was here in the UK, seeing the teams, really understanding how we operate, and then was very open to be educated around those aspects. So actually, whilst there are mechanic bits that you have to get round, he was so supportive in unlocking them, translating a lot of what we needed to understand from what would we need to make happen. And so that partnership that was the final part of the puzzle.
Right. Because I think, Germany have a very, very different approach to apprenticeships, don't they? I mean, it's something that they've embraced, as a country for many years, and it's quite a prestigious kind of program for people, to go on. And I guess, I don't know if Alex was from Germany or sort of understood the apprenticeship system, but I guess that would have helped as well.
Yeah, our German office has an amazing heritage of working student concept. So whichever they kind of name it under. So if you look to Germany and France, this is just natural to them. The unique part is this funding aspect that the UK's put into place. I think that was the education part. But you look to our CEO, Christian Klein, he was a working student. So if there's no better poster story of starting in an organization and literally working your way to the top. So that aspect was never almost in question, which is good.
Yeah.
It was more just that, what we'd have to actually write in a contract, right? It gets down into that nitty gritty, and Alex was just, an incredible partner in that space, and helped us through. But as I say, we needed to get all of the other elements in place before he could unlock that bit for us.
So, Lindsey, if we were to sort of to conclude this conversation with the sort of, if there were sort of any messages that you would like to communicate about the apprenticeship program to the listeners, or any of the key learnings that you've had, what could be the final message of this sales transformation podcast with you?
So I guess two things. One is the importance of understanding that sales is a profession. So whichever way you look at it, whether you're looking at level 6 or level 7, or however you're wanting to educate and upskill your sales teams, seeing it as a profession is really important, because it's an important aspect of the respect of the role, and just simply how complex being a salesperson is, whatever industry you're in, but certainly in tech, it's become increasingly difficult. So I think really looking at it in that regard is that sales is a profession, and so in any other profession you would absolutely have this type of program of activity. And I think the other part is make sure you're working with a provider who can help you understand this space and who has the experience in it. There's lots of providers out there in different frameworks and agreements, but that's the most important part, that they can help when you're having the tough times, that they can go, look, let's keep going, because that was a big part of our relationship with you guys. And also starting to think of unique ways. So that they would be the two things that I would suggest. Is one, really acknowledge that sales is a profession, and the second part is make sure you've got a provider that they're a partner, they're not a provider. That's the important part.
It's wonderful to hear you use that term profession. I think it's so close to our heart here at Consalia, and going way back to the early stages of even getting it approved, by the government through the Trailblazer Group. And I think you've been on those Trailblazer groups yourself. You know how difficult it is to get not just the standards agreed, but also the assessment process agreed. And then the level at which, is this a level 6 or a level 4 or whatever? I mean, we always felt like you that sales is incredibly complex kind of role for people to have, and that it warranted having this level 6 apprenticeship standard and also the level 7 for leaders. But I do recall in the early stages, I was invited by Middlesex University to a House of Lords event, and I was sitting, and it was around the topic of apprenticeships, and IFATE were there, and a number of others, and people from the chambers. And I remember when it came round to me introducing my interest in this, and I was saying, yes, we're really motivated to get sales recognized as a profession. There was a sort of bit of a deathly silence in that room. There were about 20 of us, I suppose. And then some lovely person said, who was in the House of Lords, said, well, I suppose you could say we're in the sales profession too, couldn't you? And of course, everyone's in sales, and it's great to get it sort of recognized in this way. When we got that letter saying that they do see sales as a profession in its own right, that we weren't going to be clubbed together with retail sales. This is B2B sales, very different. It was a moment of, that's fantastic. That was a wonderful time to celebrate. So, yeah, that's great to have you talking about the profession, and also great to hear your kind words about working with providers. I mean, the student experience for us is the most important thing, and everything we do is to try and help those individuals successfully complete the program. And our retention rates actually on level 6 and level 7 are really high. So we're delighted with the progress that we've made on that. But it's been a big learning journey. I think, Lindsey, on that note, I'd just like to say thank you hugely for your time. I think it's going to be very interesting for listeners out there who might be contemplating a sales apprenticeship, but also to learn from your experience. So I can't thank you enough for being with us today.
No, you're very welcome. It's actually been quite nice to reflect on some of that and just take a moment. So no, thank you very much, Phil.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey you've been on in a short space of time. I can't quite get over the progress you've made. So well done to you and the team. Thank you.